My guest today is one of the few people in American manufacturing whose thoughts and actions steer an entire industry. Doug Woods is the president of AMT, the Association for Manufacturing Technology. AMT is the body that runs IMTS, the largest technology show in the Western Hemisphere. It's happening this year with 89,000 attendees 2 years ago when it last happened. But Doug hasn't always been at AMT. He started in 1976, age 15, in the tool crib at his grandfather's company in Rochester. He did the apprenticeship. He ran a turnaround shop. He won the Ernst Young Entrepreneur of the Year. He's been in this seat for 17 years now, and he still talks like a machinist. What makes this conversation worth your time? Doug has a perspective almost no one else in this industry has. He sees what every machine tool builder is shipping, what every distributor is selling, and what every job shop is buying. He's been NVIDIA's market watcher for manufacturing since 2023, and in March, he announced two of the most concrete bets any industry body has made on AI: programmable cloud labs and fractional AI factories, both designed to give a 50-person job shop access to AI without an 8-figure CapEx line. One little known fact about Doug that even I only recently found out: Doug runs 100K ultras in his spare time, which, if you've ever done one, is 62 miles on foot for fun. So when he tells you something about endurance, pacing, or grinding through a long bet, he's not speaking metaphorically. Doug, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fun to be here.
So before we get into the whole conversation about manufacturing, you run 100K ultras, as you send me in your email. That's not normal. So what does running this distance teach you that running a marathon doesn't? Because I've run a marathon and I almost died.
It turns out to be all relative, actually. It's all just levels of how far you're going up the crazy scale. And so I just have gone a few more rungs up the crazy scale than you, perhaps. But yeah, I started getting into doing, 50K, 50 mile, 100K, and actually 100-mile races. And, really just kind of the difficulty just depends on where you're going. Am I doing them in the mountains, doing them at altitude? Is it going to be hot? Is it going to be dry? Is it going to be wet? Is it going to be cold? And I think it actually makes for an interesting, kind of connection as a metaphor back to business to some extent, right? So when I'm getting ready to do a 100-mile race or a 100-kilometer race, it's in the mountains someplace. I mean, what goes in ahead of time is a ton of planning, a ton of preparation. I mean, you know it's going to be difficult. And if you don't train very specifically to what you're going to be doing, so train to the mountains or train to high desert or train to cold, train to hot, wherever the situation might be, you're going to not perform well in that situation. You also know you have to do a lot of calculations, figure out how many calories you need, what type of fluids do you need, what are the aid stations, what's the distance between the aid station, how much vertical is there between things. So you try to engineer and calculate and figure out times of what it's going to take. You also know one other really important thing: it's guaranteed to go wrong at some point. When you're running for 25 to 35 hours, something's guaranteed to go wrong. And so, since it's going to go wrong, you need a plan B, a plan C, maybe even a plan D to figure out how to recover. And I don't think that's actually much different than business. I mean, all those things translate directly over from my perspective.
Yeah. So when you launch something like programmatic labs, do you feel like you're estimating all those things in advance already, or are you just, okay, let's go in after this exciting thing and then we'll figure out the issues later?
There's not many things that are big things or important things that you wing it, right? Just doesn't happen. Again, I'll make the analogy. If a friend asks me to go for a 4 or 5 hour, run at a park, national park or something nearby, I'm not that worried about that. I might just wing it. He calls me up 1 week, I'm trained well enough, okay, I'll go do it the next week. But if you're really talking about a serious endeavor, whether it's an investment of capital, people's time, huge resources, contracts, or doing a very difficult high altitude race, there is no winging it. Winging it's kind of not an option of trying it and seeing how it works out. So when we look at doing, whether it's cloud labs or fractional AI factories, or even we decided to launch MT Connect and interoperability standard, there's a lot of thought that really goes into how are we going to do it, who are we going to do it with, what's the real outcome, what do we need for a resource, what's the end game, what's the dramatic impact it has on the industry, And in fact, before we do things, we try to see is someone else already doing it.
Mm,
We don't like inventing things that already exist. We're not here to compete. We're here to accelerate and put things out that don't exist to solve a problem that's not being solved. So if we can ever find someone that's doing it, like if we could have found someone that was doing what MT Connect was back in 2006, we never would have done it because it's
mm,
really, really, really hard to create an open and free standard for
yeah.
people. But it didn't exist, so we created it so it would exist. So that's kind of how we go through that process.
Yeah. So about that inception, in June 2024, you wrote an essay about active intelligence. What stuck with me was that you were very focused about it was more shoe leather than silicon. You were like, okay, people have to get out there. People have to like they can't just stay in the job shop. They can't stay doing the same thing they did before. Now, then afterwards, 2 years later, you launched Cloud Labs and the fractional AI factories. What made you launch these, and did you feel like in those 2 years anything about your perspective changed?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I'm still, so for someone that grew up in a tool shop, I've always been very much on the techie edge of things. I mean,
Mm,
way back in the early 80s, I remember, my brother and I doing work in the tool shop with IBM robots. Not many people know about
mm,
IBM robots. So, I mean, my whole career has been very heavy tech leaning. That said, because I also grew up in a tool shop and doing an apprenticeship, I can greatly appreciate the expertise that exists from doing things and knowing how things are done. So when we look at kind of what I would call pretty advanced things like doing test beds in the cloud or a fractional AI factory, those things, yes, well, leaning towards a very technical, you could say, well, why would I need to really understand how to run the machine, or why would I really understand how the CAD model is created, or how the CAD model is actually converted and sent into the CNC? Or what's the difference between doing it on a 3-axis or a 4-axis, or basically doing it in a turning operation or doing it in a vertical or horizontal milling application? You say it doesn't matter. You're cutting, it doesn't matter. It does actually matter. I mean, if you don't understand some of the fundamentals, you can't take everything at face value that AI provides at this point. Because if you think about, again, it's important to understand how AI works, right? So here's these huge models of information that's available. And so we have to think about what information has been fed to create that large language model. And in that model, is there any context that's lost between what's pulling out of a manual or what they're getting from a video or what you're getting from whatever information you fed in? And unless you have some grounding, unless you have some experience, unless you've worked with some people, unless you've done some things yourself, you really don't have a good basis for being able to leverage the accelerating capability that the AI model actually provides for you. So I believe the two things go hand in hand. You'd be an idiot to think, oh, just whatever you learn in the tool shop, just go do things the old way, you're going to be fine. You are not.
mm,
You will be obsolete. At the same time, if you go full tilt the other way, they go,
mm,
I'm just going all in on tech. I don't need to know any of those things. You will equally crash and burn. There's a happy spot somewhere in the middle, like any normal probability curve. The most opportunity is going to be on the slightly advanced side of that curve, but at least you're not going to be thrown totally out if you're slightly on the back side of that curve. You just
yeah,
don't want to be in the tails. You just don't want to be in the extreme unless you're an R&D center, or unless you have some standardized screw machine making some component that they're going to make for forever because you can never do anything without it. Okay, those are the exceptions to the rule, not how you want to actually run your business, because there's really not a lot of opportunity in the two tails of that normal probability curve.
yeah. That's a good point. So, because I think about that just about everything in work, kind of this, okay, you need to use technology. I think of it as you need to use it to explore, you need to like do the new thing. And then you also need to exploit, like you need to be the thing you know well, you just need to become more efficient at doing.
Right.
Now, the shops or also like builders or distributors, the ones that you think are, hey, they are doing this right, like what are they doing differently? And do you think like that's the majority, the minority? What's kind of your lay of the land there?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you take any category of considering, like in the contract machining space or the NTMA, National Tooling Machining Association space, top shops, something that's actually considered a top shop, or take the top manufacturers, manufacturing technology, people that are AMT members, people that make metrology systems, robotic systems, machine tool systems, CAD systems. If you take the top people in those categories, the similarities are there. They're the ones that
Mm,
actually don't acquire a technology because it's the cool technology. They acquire technology to solve a problem. So they
mm,
first identify, what is a problem? Is it a problem of not having enough orders? Is it a problem of too high of a cost? Is it a problem, a productivity issue? Is it a personnel issue? Is it a training issue? And then once they understand the issue, hopefully they rank them, what's the number one, number two, and number three. And then they go after one, two, and three in that order and figure out what technology can I acquire, can I implement that'll solve that problem. And so over time, as you then add in more technology, so more problems, what you then next try to do is, how do I integrate a suite of solutions that are interconnected, not islands of technology solutions, but an integrated chain of solutions that integrate together well, because whether it's people, process, equipment, money, whatever the thing is, they do need to work in harmony. No one of those things works by itself. So if you just have a great person, you train another great person, you need like an entire shop of great people. It's not one piece of equipment. It's multiple pieces of equipment working together to solve a problem. No one piece of equipment does what you need. And so really it's that identification. The top shops are able to identify the people issue, the equipment issue, the financing issue, the customer issue,
yeah.
and then come up with a solution that perfectly fits that.
Do you think though? Do you see a change about that though? Like because my feeling is that at least in my world a little bit, everything's accelerating. It's like very much felt. So I'm wondering, do you think that the rate of change is increasing, and therefore do these companies have to move at rates that they previously didn't, or do you feel like for them the technology curve is still a little bit like the rate of change hasn't changed. There's obviously always change going on, but change is the same speed.
No, it's dramatically changing faster. There's no
Yeah.
question. And again, it's just the rate of what happens now as we've gone through like 70s and 80s and computer generation and internet and leveraging the tools and technology that brings you, accelerating with 5G, doing things that you can do with AI. Every part of what we do in our day-to-day lives when it comes to running a business is a rate of change accelerating at a more rapid rate of change. So the
Mm,
velocity of change continues to rapidly change. So that doesn't change, though, the paradigm of it still identifying what's the thing that you're trying to apply that technology to. Now you have
yeah.
better tools to assess where the problem is. You have better tools to remedy the problem. But again, unless you do that in a structured manner as opposed to a random manner, you separate the top shops from the not so top shops, to answer the question.
That's a fair point. Okay, I want to get back to obviously something that you started with and you at AMT created, MT Connect. So MT Connect is open, is designed to be a standard for the entire industry. Now, from what I've seen at like the last meetings, as well as just like being in the industry, is that a lot of the products that are now built on top of it, the technology like Omniverse, Microsoft Industrial AI, the OEM clouds, a lot of that is then, on the other hand, closed instead of the initial open. How do you see that evolving? Does that worry you? Do you feel like everybody wants to draw, obviously, all their customers or vendors into their platform, and it becomes that platform war instead of that original open mission?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be, there's always a concern for doing that, right? And you have to hope that there's enough competition that no one can really control the whole space. And I think what's interesting, like in the analogy you use, I mean, if you would take, Siemens or Fanuc, which were two of the huge companies that really had a lot of collective space when it was motion control or CNC controls over the years. I mean, I think the landscape is really changing. Overall manufacturing, you named just a bunch of companies there that are involved in creating platforms in the manufacturing space that were never in the manufacturing space before.
Yeah.
So that competition helps solve the problem. From an MT Connect
Mm,
standpoint, we felt that had to be made free and open and extensible so that we could solve the problem at hand. AMT didn't do it for any level of monetization. In fact, we've probably spent, over the time we've been doing it, well over $10 million creating it and giving it away for free. And we did that because we wanted to be able to accelerate the manufacturing technology community in the United States primarily. But we also knew that if you're going to make a standard, it can't be a US only standard. It has to be a worldwide standard because, much as we like to have as much manufacturing here in the United States as possible, the fact of the matter is we're in a global marketplace. And that global marketplace has to have standards that transcend borders. And so MT Connect was actually picked up very quickly by people around the world trying to solve problems. And interestingly, both I would say in China and in Europe, there was a movement after the fast growth of MT Connect, where both the Europeans and the Chinese looked at it and said, boy, this is great, we should be using this. And then after a while they said, boy, we should make our own, because we don't want the Americans just doing everything. They totally missed the concept of a standard, right?
Yeah.
And so it was interesting because they both then tried to create their own. And what happens when you create your own is first of all, you find out it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And if everyone makes their own, it's not a standard. You don't solve the problem of having all different devices connecting seamlessly and coming up with a common schema or data dictionary as to what the elements are that build an LLM that you can do with whatever you wish. But if all the data going in lacks context or scope, then you have data that you can't use, and it's different for every single producer that's providing data in. So eventually what those folks did is they put their own labels on top of an MT Connect base layer and use MT Connect, just call it something different. We don't care. The idea is have a semantic dictionary, in our case, the lowest level of the technology of information is coming out of the machine control, the sensors and information at the machine level, and then everyone up the stack through the ERP, MRP, transport mechanism. We don't care, use what you want, but at least let's get the base layer for us guys and gals in manufacturing. Let's get that part right so we can leverage and accelerate our LLMs, our large language models, to be able to do things that we know the context is correct. That was our playbook. And I think in the future, no matter who gets involved at that huge company level, there's going to be enough competition where I think they're going to still have to have things at a base layer that are open, APIs that are simply and easily connectable. And they're going to want to put some of their proprietary things on. That's natural and that's okay. We want people to be able to leverage really good economic scale with good ideas. So that's great. There just has to be some base layer of shared information that's kind of a common schema.
Obviously, having an open standard is phenomenal, right? Especially if it's like open, everybody can interact with it. They can also like modify it to make it their own. Now, what have you seen about the adoption? You mentioned that the European and Chinese, I'm assuming like associations as well, or like industry groups wanted to have their own version of it. But what do you see about the adoption, about the actual companies adopting it? Do you feel like that was easy? Did you have to push? Did you have to do like a lot of education? Because I know that sometimes things can be slow moving.
Yeah, in the beginning, it was really, really hard. We thought once our members saw it as a tool, they would quickly use it and adopt it, but they were all concerned relative to, am I giving up information? Is there something secret in the sauce we should create our own? And so it took a while for people, again, back in 2005 and 2006, a lot of people didn't know what they didn't know. What we found to be the easiest path to get it done was our members' customers desperately wanted this. So if you think about GE jet engines, if you think about Boeing, if you think about Lockheed, if you think about some of the major players in the automotive industry, they were suffering from having great technology from our members, but every piece, it was a desperate, separate piece. So if you had disparate devices with no bill, you had a black box, all of it. If you're the customer, to get the data pulled together, they didn't care that everybody wanted to have their own proprietary thing. They wanted a factory with all different stuff where they could actually grab their data. It's their data from their equipment, from their process, that they wanted to drive their productivity solutions. And it was extremely difficult. So once we got, and the companies I named very specific, including General Dynamics, those companies that I just mentioned, their names, they forced the builders to start integrating it so that their life would be easier. And as then the customers found it really was doing what it needed, they forced more of their suppliers, i.e. our members, to do more of it. And as our members found it was a tool that was useful for them as well, to be able to do things where they would know more about their equipment in a way where the data was useful for them to make better predictive analysis, to do better equipment uptime solutions, all of it started coming together. So we pushed the rope a little bit at the beginning till we kind of changed the table around a little bit, and that kind of accelerated the solution path.
Sounds like another 60-mile run.
Yeah, it was.
Great. I want to talk about, get a little bit more into the machine tools themselves. Obviously, AMT publishes the USMTO data that I know a lot of the AMT members, our customers, they use that. At the end of 2025, you published a new report showing the highest average order value since 2011. However, at the same time, unit counts have come down. So it sounds like my hypothesis, like there are fewer machines, there's more automation per machine. Looking into the future, do you feel like that AI then becomes a moat for the top shops that the bottom 80% can't catch up? Or do you think, hey, everybody's going to become much better and like the laggards can catch up? Because it seems like both in automation and then the software side, if you adopt it, you just you go that much farther. And there are companies that can adopt it with more expensive machines, but fewer are bought overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If in your, I think your analysis is spot on relative to kind of the change with USMTO. So for those who know, U.S. machine tool manufacturing technology orders, yeah, we've seen this trend. We've been watching this trend for a while, and that trend really does speak to very specifically the amount of automation being added, which speaks to kind of not only the importance of automation as a sector, but also this issue of, can I get enough people to work in the facility, but also how can I get my productivity numbers way up to be competing with people around the world? So all those pieces go together. And so if you look at the shops that are leveraging automation, and answering the second part of your question, it's not just the biggest shops that are actually integrating automation. Now the price point for some cobots, for tray handling devices and other things are at price points that really make them pretty straightforward. And it's not just the price point of the product, it's the price point and the reliability. Back in the 90s, early 2000, when I was running my own automation company, there were some reliability issues with some of the core components that were just being created at that time. A lot of that stuff now has been out for a while and is pretty bulletproof. And so you've got high reliability at a lower cost with simple connectivity, so easy to integrate those all in. And so you do have a broad spectrum of people that are bringing automation in to drive their solutions, from small to medium-sized shops up to obviously the huge companies that are leveraging it. As you bring that around to the question about AI, and you go, well, does AI not follow a similar path? Is there something about, leveraging AI that would keep the small folks out? And the interesting thing, it's not a cost issue. It's actually going to be more of a learning issue, an application issue. So the nice thing about, there's lots of things you can go do with AI that, depending on what you're doing, getting started, leveraging a simple chat, just using ChatGPT or Grok, or one of the different just Gemini AI, the things that you can just go use for free. There's a lot you can kind of do for free to do some basic things to get started, right? So anybody can go do that. You can pay up a little bit and kind of get into that next level and do some things to start helping your business. So whether you're talking about front office things, which you know well about, what are some things you can do to drive productivity and not get people kind of weighed down that they should be doing things out in their shop. A 27-person company, each person is doing a little of all those things. If you can take some front office things off their load and then let them focus more on the back, and then do some things just in the back office things relative to design or coding cycles or things like that, you can use some current available low-cost things. It starts to be a bigger issue when you go, okay, get me beyond a chatbot, get me beyond to, I do want to get into generative AI, or I want to be doing things with physical AI. I really want to be doing something where I can leverage a huge amount of data that I uniquely have, and I know it's a differentiating factor. When you start playing in that game, it's more complicated. It does require a high level of sophistication. You have to have more knowledge. Knowledge isn't something that's just held by big companies, right? Knowledge can be held
Yeah.
by smart people at any size company. A bunch of cool startups are happening with folks that are smaller. But getting a lot of the contract shops that aren't really equipped with a lot of those people, that might be a little bit of scaling, but I wouldn't really consider it a moat. I would consider them like speed bumps.
Mm.
That it's just, okay, I can't quite go at the pace I was accelerating in my plain machine tool, contract shop, machining, mold shop, whatever. I'm going to need to figure out how to navigate the space a little bit better, but you're certainly not kept out of the space because of a capital issue at all.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Now, do you see that experimentation is happening? Do you see that? Because obviously, I mean, I'll be quite honest, right? Like obviously, we talk to a lot of manufacturers of all different sizes, and we definitely see that there is more of a confidence in the larger ones. Like when we talk to enterprises, they are sometimes they aren't even further, but they're more like, okay, we need to do something about this now. Obviously, because they have a bigger leverage gap, right? But at the same time, I think, and as we talked at the MFG meeting, there is so much potential for smaller teams because for them, oftentimes the pain is actually bigger. Like it's felt more humanly than just on the balance sheet.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's back to that thing I was talking about, pushing a rope with, MT Connect. To the extent that our members that are making the equipment can be looking at, and again, they come in all ranges and sizes from, startups to, billion-dollar players, to the extent that they figure out how to not only use it themselves, of course, but in this case, we'll talk about how they use it relative to their product. And they make their product kind of an AI-centric embedded device or tool or solution. What they're doing is then accelerating the mission of their customer, and 30 to 40% of the market in any year could be those contract shops that you talked about. They're a big part of the people that buy manufacturing technology. To the extent back in the day MT Connect was embedded, you made it easy for that shop of any size to be able to get semantic dictionary data that they could go leverage into things they were doing to understand speed rates, uptime, simple things that were going on with the machine. It's the same in this particular case. I mean, to the degree our folks, and I think when you go around IMTS this September, I'm going to guarantee you, every aisle you walk down, I guarantee 9 out of 10 will say something about AI. It's
Of course.
guaranteed, right? So now to the extent you find out, well, what does that mean? What did they have done? What did they embed? Did they make it easier for you to communicate with it? Did they make it easy for you to extract data? Did they make it easier for them to work with you as you work on your application, to work off of their models to help you do something better with your enterprise? So understanding what they're doing with the technology that makes it better for you at your company and does it solve a problem. When it doesn't, just like in the MT Connect example, when the customer starts asking the OEM manufacturer, I need this in. I want to be doing this to be building my models out. I want to be doing this to do some generative AI solution-based things at my company. To the extent that that gets asked for, I need to do this or I need you to do that. I want to put a Jetson device, and I want to have it local. I want to have edge stuff that I'm going to be doing. I need to have the connectability to go do that. And I want to know that when I work with you guys, so you start having those conversations, you're going to get a customer or a group of our members looking at their customers going, we got to step up our game. We have to be able to solve what it is that the customer base is looking for. That's why, again, when folks come to IMTS, the attendee, they come to IMTS to look for a manufacturing technology solution. When they're looking for a solution, they can go find, no matter what the category is, of all the people from metrology and automation and software systems, no matter what it's going to be, when you go and you walk in and you can ask those questions, do you have the tool to do this, to solve that problem? And it actually now does do the things that also bring you into whatever level of AI you're looking at your company. You can now put the two pieces together, hardware, software, solution set, data-driven solutions in the future that really will connect the two pieces. And so I see it coming together just an early part of our conversation. It's accelerating rate. Everyone that's building the technology is embedding AI in some way. Everyone that's buying the technology wants to leverage it in some way. Now you can start to see who's really delivering and not just talking about it.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I do like that topic though. Like it's a very interesting adoption curve for me to have that pull from the customer and kind of say, hey, the OEMs, the builders eventually did it, but they wanted to do what is most important for the customer, and only they did it when it became the most important thing to their customer. Now, I know that with your other project, Programmable Cloud Labs, you had something on the adoption side where you effectively had a try before you buy model. Um, what were you seeing before that prompted that? Was that always planned, or did that change because you saw different adoption patterns?
Yeah, so we were doing some little things, again, oddly and weirdly. A lot of things go back to MT Connect. So we felt that, look, I come from the industry. I don't like working in an office, frankly, but you can imagine AMT is a bit of an office.
Yeah.
But I wanted a bit of a factory and a bit of an office. And so I got our technology team to, get some, benches in here and get some basic equipment, get a pocket NC, get a little, I'm going to call it a toy robot for the sake of argument for a moment, drop a vision camera on it, get some toy additive equipment for the main purposes of connecting an MT Connect adapters and agents to pull data, where we could then connect into the motion control, connect into the, whether it's a simple Arduino type thing, but being able to connect into the controller, pull data, look at data, leverage that data to go do something. We actually connected up to things with Georgia Tech, where Georgia Tech was actually letting us run experiments, just churning out data off of our Pocket NC to help them build out models that they were doing back at Georgia Tech. So we got into, playing the game a little bit early and doing some build out. So then that was a mini test bed. It was a physical test bed that we had here. And then we started, looking at some stuff that NIST was doing, the National Science Foundation was doing, looking at, they've had physical test beds too, but how do you scale test beds for people? How do you, and so they really were trying to go, is there a next generation of test bed solutions? I can remember working with a company in Toronto that was looking at how to create new elements for the periodic table. And so they
That's
wanted to
very
figure
cool.
out how to create. And so what they did was they created like dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of test beds with robots using particulates and chemicals and everything. And each test bed was about the size of my table here with all that automation on it. And it was just running cycles constantly. So again, physically doing a thing. And so I go, what's the next step up from that? And so that starts getting into really a virtual test bed. And so people like to do things maybe to create synthetic data. I can't run enough cycles on my piece of equipment, but I want to test certain philosophies. So can I spin things up to do a synthetic, data creation? So I take all those pieces and start gluing them together and go, what about if we could create a space where we could actually have virtual test beds that our members could come in and use. You could bring whatever of your equipment into that virtual space to be able to use. So if you happen to be making, a slant bed machine, if you happen to be making a gear hopper, if you happen to be making a CMM, whatever it was, you could bring it in. You want to test it with a loader, you wanted to test it with a new probing system, a new tooling exchange, whatever the thing was you wanted to test. If you had the correct physical model, can we give you a space that you could go do that in? And that would be your test bed doing your thing. Could we offer as a service for people to go, that's too much? Can AMT run a thing? We'll give you the models. You guys put it in, add whatever glue you guys need to do because we don't do this every day, but here's what we want out of it. So we tried to look at both. Could we scale up test beds as a service where we could do it for you, or test beds kind of like you can grab a space, whether it's at a fractional AI factory, depending on level of sophistication, or a simpler model where you guys, here it is, here's the keys, you guys run it, use it for a month, use it for a week, use it for a period of time, and then give it back. And then we'll have someone else use it next. And that's what we've been working on developing because, again, we think we need to provide the tool that lets them do what they do. We don't want to do things to take away work that they could do. If we had a member that
Mm.
goes, we're the people making virtual test beds, Great. I don't need to do it. Someone else is doing it. Super. But
Yeah.
if not, our thing when it comes to technology is three key things. It's awareness, create awareness of the thing. Acceleration, accelerate your learning process through, make it as quick as possible to get through learning it to get to adoption. So
Yeah.
it's awareness, acceleration, adoption. Get to where you're adopting the technology to deploy in your facility to solve a problem. However we can do that, as fast as we can do that to make manufacturing technology people best in class, that's our game. That's what we try to do.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I mean, I really like the part of not doing something new and doing something that the members need. I think, I mean, from my time being an AMT member, I've definitely seen that there's just, it's an association that gives a lot compared to some others. Um, obviously another big topic that is kind of occupying the entire industry is obviously retirement, workforce crisis, labor shortage. Um, I mean, and I think I agree with a lot of people, and I'd argue that that is a issue with like it's a knowledge crisis, right? It's basically like a lot of knowledge leaving the shops. Automation's trying up to make up for some of the like physical work, as there are just fewer people. But there is a lot of implicit knowledge that you hear from all these people. It's like that's where it is.
Yeah.
What do you see? What do you think? Where is that going? Do you think AI will be the saving grace, or do you think we're running into a situation where it's not fast enough, or the potentially even the situation where you have people that review results, but there's not, even if the AI is not there, there's not going to be enough people to review the results that are kind of like in the sweet spot there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone's kind of nervous and scared about that. Kind of the good news part of that equation is that's been true for like 80, 90 years. Like my grandfather told me stories of that when he started his company in 1947. You know, he had it for decades. You know, I've run companies since 1990. I started running my first company as president. I can't think of a decade, 90 to 2000, 2000, 2010, 2010 forward. I can't think of a time that I've been here at AMT. It hasn't been an issue. So it's interesting. It is an issue. Everyone talks about it as an issue, but it's always been an issue. And we always figure out
Right.
how we're going to position ourselves to get past that issue. And it's usually driving some level of technology, some new knowledge, level of collaboration. And we always find a way. So I'm not, dismissing it or diminishing it in any way. It is an issue. But I don't get hung up about it at all because I've watched
Awesome.
for a long time our way to navigate around it. And AI is probably one of the best singular tools for getting around it that has ever existed. There's several different companies now that are leveraging a product where I'll take it back to one of the things I had when I was running a mold shop back in the early 1990s. So you had guys that were really great at hand finishing, a tool. So even no matter how good you do on your EDM and what you're cutting with the wire, I mean, there's some hand finishing that you needed to do back then. And so certain types of things are almost like craftsman type things. Today, whether it's craftsman type things or just a processing thing you do, there's ways now that you can leverage, having people wearing a camera, a microphone, and actually cameras where the work zone is, and actually just watching people that are maybe in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, doing things that are unique about talent that's in their head, things that they've done, what a toolmaker knows, what someone knowing how to do probing, setting up a CMM to do a beveled gear and how you properly do it and set up and get the right data structure set up to the machine structures. All of those steps and talking through what they're doing, being able to capture all of that, capture the sound, capture the video, capture all of that at one time, and then let AI synthesize that. And then in the future, maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, someone's going, how do I set up on a coordinate measurement machine, going through getting a part coordinate machine, doing a bevel gear? Well, you know what? There's a simple way. You ask that question. Here comes Grok or one of those other things, drops a quick video. Here's how you do it. Here's the steps you go through. And it could have been how to do hand finishing, how to do a slip fit on something for a bearing assembly, whatever it is. Now that ability to capture language and vision and tactile capability and all those, you now have a place to store that, and not just store that, how to retrieve it, not just how to retrieve it, but how to condense that retrieval to just that morsel of information that you really want to solve your problem. I think that's a paradigm shift. So what we've been solving for decades and figuring it out, the tools now to do that are like 1,000 to 1 more capable
Yeah.
and allow you to solve it. So stop talking about workforce problems being the biggest issue. I got it, but come on, you got tools that I didn't have 30, 40 years ago. So don't complain.
No, no, I think it's a very good thing that it's also been a long time issue because it means that usually it's not new. Like everybody thinks it's different this time, but it's just kind of the same thing.
Yeah, all the way back to
Um,
agriculture, Yannick. If you think about, way back machine, what farmers were doing in a field. And now you look today, I mean, essentially, you can have drones doing crop dusting. You can program your tractors on geo positioning to go to where they need to go. You can modify each of what you do with your watering system by hydroscopic kind of like sensors out in different points of the field and adjust water flow to different parts of your field based on what might have got more rain than other. I mean, think about that compared to how many people who had to do what 50 years ago. And look
yeah,
at what you can do
yeah,
today
you're
with
right.
your
Yeah, I mean,
Caterpillar or Deere. And now apply that same thing to manufacturing today with those tools we just got done talking about. And think about where do you end up being?
I couldn't agree more. Two things. As you look at manufacturers of all different types, builders, distributors, suppliers, MRO, shops, what do you see is kind of like the top end of what they do right now, as well as what's the entry case? Like what's somebody feels like, oh, there's a lot happening right now. I don't know where to start. What do you tell them? Kind of
When
like
it comes
what's
when it
the
comes to technology or AI,
right now, right? Yeah, like it can be automation. You say, hey, actually, most shops that are haven't done much, they should just get a cobot arm. Or you say, actually, they should make sure that they try out ChatGPT to do X, Y, and Z.
yeah. I think right now it goes a little bit to what's your biggest problem you're trying to solve. And so the chain I would go through now with the benefit of chatbots is I would be going around either if I know it myself, it's my shop and I know what the issues are. I would take my top 3 issues and I would be going to have a conversation with chatbot. Or if I wasn't sure, I'd go out with my engineers, my team, my tool maker, my mold maker, my software developer, whatever it is, and I'd go look at, what do we got to do to get more deliveries? What do I got to do to get more orders? What do I got to do to ship faster products? What do I got to do to get more uptime out of my machine? Whatever my thing is. And then I would actually pose my top 3 questions of my top 3 problems to one of those AI chat tools. And then I would let it kind of spit out a bunch of things and I would ask more questions. I think iterate a couple more times down. And then what I would do is go, okay, now that I know that, I'm going to go find people that make that thing. So if it's in the manufacturing technology space, you can jump on the AMT website. You can go on the IMTS website, IMTS Plus website. Hey, who's got the technology for this? Who makes this thing? Who can I talk to? Because I think this, if I got this, it would solve that. And you start that process. You can talk to a distributor that's in your area going, hey, I thought that maybe this 5-axis thing or this probing head machine or this would solve my problem. Here's what I'm trying to solve. This is what I learned. This is what I'm looking at. Can you help me out? Are there things that you sell that actually match, and start engaging that conversation? I would join my local association if it's an NTMA situation, obviously AMT things, like ask other people. I got to tell you, my grandfather grew his company from 9 people to 1,200 people because he was very active in NTMA. He asked everybody what they're doing. How did you make this? Where did you get it? Who did you work with? You can either be asking chat, you can be asking your local people at a chapter meeting of SME or NTMA. You can be going to AMT meetings. I mean, whatever it is, fabricating, no matter what you're doing. The only thing that you got to not do is think you live in some kind of void and you know all the answers. Because the number one tool, the number one thing that maybe someone's going to get paid for in the future is knowing how to ask the right questions and knowing how to ask the right questions to the right potential party. And
Mm.
so if you know the right question to ask and who to ask, you pretty much have the keys to the castle.
I agree. Sometimes, especially now that we can ask so many questions and get answers so quickly, it actually becomes quite difficult to come up with the right questions because you always hear you're completely right and everything's perfect, but then you gotta like, okay, what do I actually need to know? What do I actually need to solve?
Right.
Great. I feel like that already kind of answered my last question. Like, hey, what would you recommend to a shop to do? And just before we wrap this up, what's something that you think will happen this year to the industry, and that you'd like the industry to leave them with, like in terms of what should they change, or what should they be optimistic about?
Yeah, I think what I really hope happens, and I hope it continues to happen at accelerating rate, is kind of what indirectly I've seen happen from the tariffs. I'm not a big fan necessarily of how they're applied, but I love the idea of the why. I think we really need to be more capable here of making things.
Mm,
I think people should make things where they're consumed. So I'm not a big player on saying everything has to be made here in the US. I don't believe that. But I think what we should do for sure is stop chasing the cheapest dollar and sending our manufacturing all over the world as if it didn't make any difference where stuff is made. You need to understand applications engineering. You need to understand materials and things that go together. And you lose that if you just send your manufacturing anywhere in the world, and realize there's a cost of doing that. So to the
yeah.
extent you've seen a huge amount of people saying they're willing to commit, and the number on the website right now for the White House that keeps track of commitments that are made by people, it's like 9.8 trillion. It's a really big number. So you even said, like, again, 10% of that is, possible. There's a lot of investment coming into the United States because we are the largest consumption market. So if the idea is make it where it's consumed, because it makes the most sense, why ship big, heavy things around the world? If the lowest cost labor is the gating factor, well, if your labor is the most efficient because you're leveraging technology like the ones we talked about, that becomes an equalizing factor. There's a reason why China is the biggest country, the biggest purchasing country in the world for robots. Two issues, really. They have a huge 400-person deficit of people that weren't born during a certain period of their timeline. But also they realize that their labor costs have gone up dramatically. They won't continue to be the lowest cost labor market. And so they have to be the most efficient. Everyone is going to eventually get to the same level of capital equipment purchasing capability. And it's going to be those people who can execute and utilize that technology the best, because everything else gets equalized. And so what I really hope our folks do is go, yes, we need to make manufacturing here. We need to make our products here. We need to make the ones that are important to make here, that economically we consume here and are key to our national security here. Okay. Others, we can work with our partners around the world, but we've got to do those core things. And then those core things we got to do with the latest and best technology, because someone else who gets into the game late won't start with our technology from 50 years ago. They're going to start with technology today. If you go to the far reaches of Africa, they're not going back to rotary phones to catch up on how to get communication. They've got the latest Samsung or Apple phones with the latest 5G networks. Why? Because it's the easiest thing to set up. So the same thing has to be true in manufacturing. Where you start needs to be as of how we are today for technology and accelerate from that point forward. That's what I hope our industry really, really gets.
Thank you, Doug. Good point. I really appreciate you for being here with me. Super interesting conversation, and hope to talk soon again, Doug.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Have a good one.
Thanks.